21 days in northern Italy. Sounds dreamy, doesn't it? This was the fall of 2022, and we had just come out of the pandemic. As content creators and writers on wine, Italy was an amazing landscape to explore. With over 500 indigenous wine grapes on the Italian peninsula, there is no lack of variety to delve into. So when an opportunity arose to attend a wine media conference in Lombardia, we jumped at the chance. And if you're going to Italy for a conference, you might as well spend a few extra days exploring while you're there. We ended up planning a 21-day trip to northern Italy, packing in visits to regions, vineyards, cities, and wineries. Of course, it wasn't enough time, but we tried to make the most of it. We share our adventures with you, with stops in Milan, San Moritz, Moscato di Scanzo, Val Calepio, Descensanza del Garda, Val Tennessee, Valtellina, Lugana, Mantova, Trento, Bolzano, Conegliano Valdobbiadene, Venice, Padua, Valpolicella, Soave, Durella, Verona, Florence, and Cinque Terre. We meet winemakers and vineyard owners, some large, some small, and learn so much about this beautiful country, its people and wines. There is amazing food, great places to stay, glorious landscapes, and historic cities. Join us as we spend 21 days in northern Italy. Milan, even in fall rain, is a beautiful and vibrant city. We arrived and took a nap. Jet lag is real, my friends. Luckily, we had allowed ourselves 3 days to acclimate before our real wine adventure began. After our nap, we set forth to find lunch and figure out the local transit system. Then we made our way to the center of Milan, the Duomo. The Duomo di Milano is the major cathedral in the center of Milan, and its construction spanned almost 600 years. This was the site where the St. Ambrose Basilica had stood in the 5th century. There were additions and fires, and in 1386, the construction of the current Duomo began and continued until 1965. The style leans towards Gothic due to the influence of the architect Nicolas de Bonaventure, who was appointed in 1389. The exterior of the cathedral is clad in a rare Condolia marble that ranges from white to pink to salmon. In 1774, the cathedral was topped with a golden copper sculpture by Giuseppe Perego, known as the Bernina, which became the symbol of Milan. While you can schedule tours to see the inside of the Duomo, there is plenty to see on the exterior walls. It is embellished with 150 gargoyles guarding the 135 spires and over 3,400 statues. These statues, as you can imagine, are in a variety of styles, having been created over a span of centuries. The square in front of the Duomo was set for an event when we were there. We are not fashion people, so the fact that we had arrived mid-Milan Fashion Week took us by surprise. The city was buzzing with events and fashionistas. Through this busy crowd, we made our way to the historic Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, Italy's oldest active shopping mall, and of course, the place you want to be during Fashion Week. Often considered Milan's drawing room, this 4-story cross-shaped structure was the 19th century creation of architect Giuseppe Mangoni. Strolling the Galleria is a way of entering the heart of the city. It was designed as a passageway between the Duomo and the Teatro alla Scala. The gallery's glass and iron ceiling allows light to pour in while keeping people safe from the elements, such as the rain on the day we were there. The space is embellished with mosaics, ironwork, and frescoes in a neo-Renaissance style, and it features shops, restaurants, and cafes. There is also an ancient city ritual to be performed here for good luck. On the floor of the gallery's octagon, there is a mosaic of a bull representing the Turin coat of arms. It is said that you must spin your heel on the bull's testicles 3 times for luck. Sadly, in the push of the crowd, I was unable to locate the bull. We strolled out to the Piazza della Scala before the drizzle became too much for these weary travelers, and we headed back to our hotel to explore the flavors of Milan at the restaurant. I began with a Franciacorta, the sparkling wine this region is known for. Michael began with bubbles a little bit further afield, a Prosecco from the Veneto. After a delicious dinner, we were off to bed. The morning of our first full day in Italy began with a morning interview with Francesca Mecchia. She and her mother run Vigno Petruzzo, a small winery in Friuli on the Slovenian border. She's the 3rd generation of women working in this family-run winery. She zipped across Milan, where she lives with her family, on her moped to greet us at the hotel and tell us about their winery. After our interview with Francesca, we headed out to explore Navigli. This district in southwest Milan is crossed by several canals. Naviglio is the Italian word for canal. These ancient waterways were originally designed for irrigation and navigation and became important for communication and trade in the city. The canals also featured some famous architects, including Leonardo da Vinci, who designed a system of levees while researching a means of transport from Lake Como to Milano. Reflected in the Navigli, you see the tall buildings, and your eyes are drawn up. Dripping with greenery and lined with flower boxes, the balconies are enchanting. We arrived on the day of the famous monthly antique and vintage flea market, held on the last Sunday of every month. We walked the streets, crossed the bridges, and strolled, watching the fashionistas with dogs parading by, while others searched for treasures among the antiques. We reached the Darsena, turned back along the Naviglio Grande, and came upon the Vicolo de Lavandaia. This is the washing alley. This was a public wash house from the Middle Ages through the 1950s. Remnants of the stone walls where the washerwomen worked remained. Further on, alleys between buildings were draped in vines, and inside, a courtyard beckoned. Here, you can see the Palazzi della Ringheria. These are tenements that have shared balconies. Long ago, the residents here would access their homes through the balconies on the upper floor facades. One alley opened to a Greek courtyard, surrounded by old brick buildings with vines sinking their tendrils between the bricks to climb and cover the walls. It was a bit quieter here compared to the bustle on the canal. Then the sound of our growling stomachs chased us out of the peace and quiet to search for a quiet, or relatively quiet, cafe at which to lunch. We found Pinch Spirits and Kitchen on the other side of the canal and grabbed a cafe table outside so we could people watch since the day was overcast but not rainy. With time wasting on our only full day in Milan, we were off to the Castello Sforzesco. Francesco Sforza, a warlord, became the Duke of Milan and in the 1400s rebuilt the ruins of the castle. This type of thing happened multiple times, and you can see the patchwork of multiple builds over time in the architecture and stonework. This was one of the largest fortified structures in Europe. Used first as a military citadel, it came to be one of the most prominent cultural spaces in Milan. The Filarete Tower was named after the Florentine architect Antonio Avellino, who was known as Filarete. He was hired by Francesco Sforza to reconstruct the castle. This tower collapsed just a century after its completion, and what you currently see was carefully reconstructed by Luca Beltrame. It was inaugurated in 1905 and dedicated to King Umberto I. We wandered back out to the streets and found ourselves in Brera. This is considered the bohemian part of Milan, with smaller shops and restaurants. This area was originally a medieval district and evolved into a cultural hub for the city during the Renaissance. It retains much of this atmosphere today. We had reservations for dinner at Nabucco. This elegant restaurant in Brera is named after the famous opera by Giuseppe Verdi. We sat on the patio at the entrance so we could watch the people stroll as we dined. The evening finished with a stroll through the quieter streets back to the metro and back to our hotel, then to bed to prepare for an early morning. On day 3, Michael had planned a trip on the Bernina Express. Here in Milan, we were relatively close to Lake Como and to the Swiss border. To try and take in as much as possible, we had a coach trip booked that would take us to St. Moritz, Switzerland. Lake Como, while impressive, was hard to see. Heading north, we had the southbound lanes between the lake and us, not to mention that much of the trip was in a tunnel. We stopped on the way to get pastries and take in the Orabian Alps that we were heading towards. The drive takes us past lakes and quaint villages, and finally comes to the winding hairpin turns of the Maloja Pass. At last, we passed the lakes that lead up to St. Moritz. Sitting 1,856 meters above sea level, that's over 6,000 feet, St. Moritz is on the southern slopes of the Abruzzo Alps, looking over the valley of the Upper Engadine and the picturesque Lake St. Moritz. We were here in the fall on a glorious day when the lake was simply magical. But this resort town really shines in the winter, when it is one of the most famous ski resort towns in the world, having twice hosted the Winter Olympics in 1928 and 1948. Due to the train schedule, we had very little time to enjoy St. Moritz. After a quick walk through the town, I headed to Cafe House Hanselmann. Over 125 years ago, Fritz Hanselmann opened a bakery here in St. Moritz. In addition to bread, they make engadine, nutcakes, and chocolates. I stocked up for gifts to take home. Now we were off on our adventure on the Bernina Express. The railway begins in Chur, the oldest town in Switzerland, and travels south to St. Moritz, and then continues south into Tirano, Italy. Built between 1908 and 1910 to connect St. Moritz to Tirano, the route was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2008. We would be taking the southern half of the trip. The beautiful train has several style cars. We were on one with windows that opened. Perfect for getting beautiful photographs and video without the glass in the way. Also perfect for catching a cold as the alpine air rushes in. We departed from St. Moritz, traveling south past the white and black lakes, Alp Groom and Merilogo, the village on the Poschiava Lake. then over the Brusio Circular Viaduct before crossing the border into Italy and arriving in Tirano. You would think the day would be over, and for many of our fellow travelers it was, as they curled up to nap on the trip back to Milano. But for us, we were about to drive through the Valtellina Valley. See more on our Valtellina episodes on Crushed Grape Chronicles video. We will return here later in the trip. We were off on our first trip into Italian wine country before the Wine Media Conference in Lombardia. Expansive views of the landscape to the south fan out before us one moment, followed by peaks into tiny valleys tucked in between the hills as the road hairpins back upon itself. We turned down a steep driveway into a property called Martini Col de Paste. As we pull down the driveway, a magnificent little valley opens in front of us. It was picture postcard perfect. This was our destination, the valley of the Moscato di Scanzo DOCG. The entire DOCG is there in front of us. It is just 31 hectares, that's 76 acres, between 300 and 500 meters above sea level. They focus on one grape, Moscato di Scanzo, a rare red Moscato grape that they make in a sweet red passito style as they have for centuries. For more on this beautiful region, its wine and winemakers, watch our episodes on Moscato di Scanzo on Crushed Grape Chronicles video. Our day was not over. We had another stop in the Val Calepio DOC. The Consorzio Tutela Val Calepio is also near Bergamo. While most regions in Italy are filled with indigenous grapes, when the Val Calepio DOCG was formed in 1976, they found that most of the grapes planted in the area were international grapes. The vineyards here had been abandoned, and when interest in wine growing started up again in the mid-1970s, producers planted the international grapes that were most popular: Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Pinot Grigio, and Pinot Bianco. The Consorzio president welcomed us at the Villa Redana, where we enjoyed stunning views. This villa dates back to the 18th century. Their hospitality was incredible, and the light supper of tasty bites was never ending. At last, we were en route to Desenzada del Garda on the shores of Lake Garda. Tomorrow, day 5, we will take you to the Val Tennessee region on the western shores of Lake Garda. All this is weaved into magical moments and stories to be shared. All of this comes together in the journey of discovering wine country.